Peter, it's the 9th of December, 10th of December, and we're in your wonderful study with all your books, which are really books of a lifetime's journey. And your journey is so, in some ways, unique because you have made it your journey's into, the mystic, the path of the mystic. I remember many years ago, and I hope you don't mind my saying this, we can cut it out if you want. You said, I'm a vicar in the Church of England. I'm a mystic who happens to be a vicar in the Church of England. And I thought that is so inspiring because your whole journey is the journey of seeking. And when you teach, when you share with us, there's always, what can I say? How do I put it? It's always realizing the one. It is always the love of the one. It's always the presence of the one. And I'd like to ask you how you see, your journey, your path as a mystic. Do you have, do you see how it has evolved in a particular, that would be really helpful for others to understand? You were talking just now about Maurice Nicoll, and I know that you visited with the wonderful monk priest in India.
Ramana Maharshi.
Oh, Ramana Maharshi.
Yes.
But I'm thinking of the Christian. I'm reading his book right now, sorry. Anyway, the monk who had an ashram in India, who lived in India most of his life. Anyway, I am...
Right, yes.
Yes.
Right.
So, Peter, would you like to just... What do you see? What really is most meaningful for you in your journey?
I think as a child, I never had any difficulty about God, whatever one means by that word. And I saw it as a child as some enormously superior, fatherly-like person, and felt quite open about the stories of creation and stories of the given in the Christian and Jewish backgrounds. But the quest was really to find out much more about this and to find what it really meant, the word God. How do we relate? And can we find a purpose for being here on earth? Because I felt there must be a purpose for that, because there seems to be a purpose in everything in creation. So that was always in the background somehow there. So I took an interest in it. I was brought up in a Christian background. Grandfather he'd been in the Church of England and spent his life dedicated to that. So that may have been some influence to me as well. But I was really more interested in what later became called mysticism, which is really the relationship between something of the source of all, as I would refer to the source of all, refer to God, and really sought about this. But then, of course, as one does, as a young person, you get interested in all sorts of other things. And I got very interested in politics. So I decided that politics was much more exciting. And I would follow a career perhaps in that in some way.
And did that relate to mysticism?
Well, it related in the sense that one needs to be able to do something that is helpful and right in a political sense, and to be an influence in that kind of a way. So one had a sort of dream of the perfect society. I'm too young to sort of work out what a society really meant and all the ingredients of it. But it was just a general picture of saying, yes, love and peace were things to be sought. One might be able to do something about it as a politician.
Peter, it's a very special kind of young person who has those ideals.
But it's also mixed up, you see, with ego, because we've all got an ego, and we don't sort of realise that at a young age. And so there was some glorification in that was also a way of doing something prominent and making a name for oneself. So the ambition was there to do that.
Well, ambition is also energy of the spirit coming through for us to launch ourselves on our path, isn't it?
That's right. I go along with that. Yes, absolutely. But it was a long time in life's journey before I really began to understand something more deeply about the role of the ego and in the relationship we have with our ego. So I've already said there that I see it as something separate in a way, something which each individual can look at, to look at their own ego.
And where did that perception of the ego, the role of the ego, and come from? That you're saying that it took some time.
I think a lot of the sort of Gurdjieff works, which I'd looked at in some depth. The story goes that I was following a political career and things were going quite well, and I was asked if I would stand for Parliament for Manchester Exchange, which was a hopeless seat from my point of view, but as I was told, I need to be blooded. And to see how I got on with it, I'd already been chairman of Chelsea Young Conservatives and got to know a lot of people in the political family, as it were, there. And so it was the next step, the first step on the road, getting somewhere politically, to be able to go for this offer. So I'm very pleased about that. And then I became ill with tuberculosis shortly afterwards, and I had to go into hospital and into a sanatorium. And I was dropped like a hot brick by the politicians. And I had to give up my job as well, which was being trained as a manager in the John Lewis Partnership, trainee manager, and went to Midhurst, a lovely hospital there, King Edward VII, and spent about 9 months. But prior to that, I had been looking at some of the Nicoll's books, which I had been introduced to it by a friend, and was also interested from there going into looking at the Gurdjieff work, which my friend was also interested in and introduced me to it. And so while I was resting in this lovely sanatorium in Sussex, I read and read and read as many of these books as I could, And that began to give me a feeling about it. But I still felt that I was drawn to be in the church in some way, Church of England in particular, but I wasn't quite sure whether that was right, whether perhaps I ought to be a Roman Catholic. And so in my prayer, I asked to be shown what I should be doing and for guidance in this. And if I didn't get any guidance, I was going to follow the political path.
And you did receive guidance.
I did, and it came a few weeks later when the doctor came to me, because I was up and about in the hospital, came to me and said, would I go and visit a patient upstairs who was in need of somebody to walk with him around the gardens because he'd had a problem, a lot of illness, wasn't able to walk very well and needed some help. So we were all in separate rooms, and on our rooms was the name. So I went up to see this person, and I saw he was the Reverend something or other. And that made me sort of back down. I thought, I don't want to get caught in some sort of persuasion to join some form of Christianity, which I wouldn't really have been happy with. I'd been introduced to meditation. I wanted something where the way of silence was included and understood.
So, Peter, you said that you were already looking for sign. So you were already open in what one calls the mystical path, the mystical way of looking for, being open to guidance, if you like.
Well, that's right, because that's just happened. So I walked with him, and while we were walking round, he said, I think you ought to be a priest. And now I can arrange it for you, because he was fairly senior in his role.
But
and as soon as he said that, you got that chill down the spine, the spine, and you just know instantly that that's a response to your own prayer. So I said to him, yes, please do that. I'd like to do that. And so he was able to arrange for me to meet a bishop and discuss it and start on a course and go eventually to Theological College in Oxford, Wycliffe Hall. So that all happened there, and so I made the change during that time. And then, as happens in these things, you get well again and off you go, and you're tempted to go back to where you were before. And that's where you've got to be strong-minded enough to say, no, I'm going on the new way that I experienced a bit of during my time in the sanatorium. And that's how it happened. So I then went into the Church of England, but I had a feeling that I had a bit of a mission there, which was really to help with the way of silence and meditation, and to introduce that wherever I was posted or whatever happened during the course of that life. And that's really what has happened in its small way.
There are two things. An aside, which, is that you mentioned that you were not sure whether it would be the Anglican or the Catholic Church.
Yes. I did that. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. Yes, remind me. Because I did ask about that, which should it be? And the the way I got it was, it came to me, you've been brought up in the Anglican way, and that's your way.
And what was it about the Catholic way that made you just look at it, you know?
There's a certain spirituality there. And I'd also read something of the Russian Orthodox Church, and the most beautiful writings and mysticism that is contained in those writings. So that made me sort of look very much at that side of the church's work.
Do you still look at those writings?
Yes, they were an influence on me at the time.
And
yes.
Can you say what they give examples?
They're really about monastics and the teaching that was given in the monasteries, and it was of a very different level from what I had sort of experienced elsewhere. Yes. No, I became very much taken by it.
And also, you had you mentioned that you had previously been reading Gurdjieff and Maurice Nicoll.
Yes.
And what is it in those? And this was while you were, assuming you were going to make a political life, a political profession. And what was it in those two that, what nurtured you? What came through for you in Gurdjieff and in Maurice Nicoll?
Yes, Maurice Nicoll was the first one, the New Man, that he wrote. And that is an interpretation of the parables seen from a psychoanalyst point of view and the interpretation of it. And when I read those, it instantly opened my mind and my being to seeing something at a different level. And that's my really first deep spiritual experience and realization of what I'd been seeking for was somewhere there. It was an introduction to it.
What is there, Peter?
And that was to seek for the real meaning and teaching, and through that begin to see something, little bit of the purpose, perhaps, of being on earth. But that had to develop later. As I experienced more of it, but to understand that was there in the Bible, and to see that it was all part of the Jewish and Christian background, gave me great strength and confidence to pursue it. But I also realized at the same time that in conversations, very few people had seen it in that kind of a way, the spiritual side of the teachings, the deep spiritual side. So it's difficult to have any conversations.
Yes, I was going to say, were these deep spiritual sides concealed, both in the Bible itself and also in the Christian culture, the existing Christian culture?
Yes. So it was the question of the self, what is meant by the self. And that has been the great discovery for me, to begin to see something about self. The story of Abraham taking his son to sacrifice him, as it were, to God. God saying, sacrifice your son. Give me your son. What must I do, Abraham was saying, in order to really follow the way. And the son is, it's not Abraham, it's, we keep it there for the moment.
Yes.
And he takes his son up the hill to kill him and sacrifice him to God. And I thought, well, this is a terrible story. And how can it be that it's a true happening? And I realized from my reading of Nicoll, because you've got to look for the spiritual meaning of all that. What does it mean to kill something in yourself in order to find something higher? And
Yes.
it was, I realized that, of course, the son, particularly of a Jewish father, is so very special. He's going to inherit everything, and he's going to grow and be fostered and looked after in order to follow the same rituals and everything else. But he is the apple of the eye of the father, to a very great extent. And so to sacrifice that, he was really sacrificing himself and everything else in his life that he expected from a son. His whole meaning of coming on earth was there in the son. And to have to kill the son, to make a sacrifice of him, was the greatest thing that he could give to God. And so by following God and taking him up, and then God says, no, I don't want you to kill your son. That will be provided in a different way. A lamb is there in the bushes, sacrifice that. And so the teaching was all there, because immediately one sees the relationship between the lamb in the bushes and the meaning of Christ, the beginnings of seeing something more deeply of the meanings of Christ coming on earth. And so that was something to be explored in the years to come. Yes, so that was important. It was an important realization. And the whole question of what is the self anyway? What is my relationship with myself? Or who is myself? And this became the question of who am I? Which was such a question that I'd been asked from my friend who had taught me meditation, who was a disciple of Ramana Maharshi. He was Ceylonese, and he had built up his own spirituality from that. And I was obviously very influenced by his meditations and teaching me how to be still.
And you went to the Ramana Maharshi's center, didn't you?
Yes.
In India.
I went to visit it later on in India. Yes,
Yes.
I did.
Yes.
Yes, I had to make a pilgrimage there. Yes, as I did for the Sufis too. I went to see where everybody was buried. The great master.
The Dargah.
Yes. Yes.
So what was the meaning for you when you went to Ramana Maharshi's? I can't remember what you call it, the center.
Yes.
Because I've been there. It's very beautiful. There's a great quietness there.
Arunachala is the name of the hill.
Arunachala is the mountain.
I can't pronounce it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's a deep quietness there.
Yes.
And the library where he taught.
And to spend all that time in stillness to find out who you are and your relationship with the source of all.
And that's his teaching, to ask, who am I?
Yes, who am I? That's the name of his great book, yes. Yes. And that remained with me all through my journey to this very day. And of course, it's only in the more recent times that I've been able to see that, yes, who am I? It's this relationship with the ego, and seeing that you're not your ego, that's a major part of your nature, but it isn't yourself. And I love those expressions sometimes. When we're going on and we've done something awful, we say, oh, I wasn't really myself when I did that. And it was a lovely example of exactly that. The ego is very important in our life. We need it. And it's part of our evolution from the animal stage. I'm very much a believer in evolution of that kind. Darwin's theories on it. So that as we evolve, we begin to see this relationship with our ego. And then you look at your ego and you can examine it and say, right, I want to be ambitious, I want to be a politician, I want all the power and the glory and everything else that goes with it, and to be famous and leave a legacy on earth and so on. And you then have to ask, what in me is actually making a judgment of myself? It's not myself, it's the ego side of my nature, and it's the true self, or the place of the Christ, as we would say in Christianity, that is making this judgment. And I'm working together with the source of all to see what's really there. And now I can control the ego if I wish to, or I can go along with it, or it'll catch me out from time to time, but I can be aware of it. And of course, as soon as you do that, you become aware of other people's ego and occasionally of their true self that comes out from time to time, and have an understanding of what they are doing, and perhaps help them a little bit if they wish to go a bit further and explore these things.
And as we emerge with an understanding, a perception, an understanding of our ego and the relationship in our lives of us, of the self,
yes.
So we resonate with others at these different levels.
Yes.
And we may find that we are able to resonate at the level of the self with others in the level of the self. And that is part of the journey, isn't it, Peter, that of enabling resonance of the one through each other.
Yes, lovely. Yes, it is. It is. And then you realize what the oneness is. It's something much greater. Yes. And we're all one together. Everything comes from one source.
Yes.
Yes. But it was only much later on in life that I began to see something of the relationship between this and the Christian teaching, because it was all there in the story of Cain and Abel. Mm-hmm. And I realized, of course, Cain gets rid of Abel, or kills him in the story, and he's killing off his own spiritual side, so that the ego can do what he likes. And the story tells us, and he goes off and founds many cities and becomes worldly. And then all the other stories that go with that of Jesus looking at, or not so much, before that time, of the stories of Jacob and Esau. Mm. And Jacob's food is good, and he is a shepherd. And the word shepherd, it becomes important because he's a shepherd of people's lives and can help. But you can't force a sheep to do what you want to do. You have to lead them. And Esau's food was worldly, and his pottage, even though he was the eldest son. Yes, there's those sort of stories, biblical stories, began to, with Nicoll's perception working with me, as it were, begin to see and understand what is being said here.
It's fascinating, Peter, because you said that Nicoll was a Jungian. Isn't that right? Or brought Jung's understanding.
Yes, he was. They worked together, yes.
Yes. They worked together. And this is fascinating how the emerging of the true meaning, the true message is interlinked with the emergence of our opening of our understanding about our psyche, our psychology. That Jung was not only an important bearer of psychology, but he was opening up our whole human evolution, really.
Yes.
And I'd like to ask you, you've talked about the awareness, the opening awareness of the ego and the self, and how with Ramana Maharshi, this was, his work, Who Am I? Is there also a sense of how the self itself has many levels, if you like, many dimensions?
That is still to be explored, but in looking at this, the self and the ego, I realized that this story was really Cain and Abel, as we mentioned, and that Cain is very much the ego self and kills off the spiritual side of his life, Abel. Mm-hmm. And in the story, there's a lovely question when God comes along and says, "What have you done to your brother?" And he says, "Am I my brother's keeper?" This lovely story of saying, am I, as a soul, the keeper of my ego? What is the relationship? And it's that relationship that needs to be explored fully and positively. And then, of course, he says to Cain, "You will forever be a seeker, but I will protect you. I'll put my mark upon you, and you will seek." And of course, he's talking about you will seek to find Abel, the presence of God with you. And then I realized that this is really a creation story. It's a story about the purpose of creation and the beginnings of finding a purpose of creation, which is for us all to find what some people would say is their true self, the presence of Christ within them, or some other term of that kind. And it is then that an even deeper purpose can be found, perhaps, if we begin to work with the true self that we are and accept that. So the journey is one of evolution in a sense. You're evolving all the time in your thinking and understanding and broadening your thinking with reading of other religions, and beginning to see in other religions a great deal of that teaching is still there. And then I sort of searched a little bit as far as I could to find out where the story of Cain and Abel came from, its origin, and found that that was much earlier than Judaism, which is where it's generally seen to have originated, and it is actually Zoroastrian. And so it goes back a very long way indeed.
That's remarkable, Peter, that it originated. The weaving of wisdom is interreligious, absolutely.
Yes.
And just that realization opens something very true in ourselves.
So part of the purpose of life is to discover that. And then one can go to, next stage is not quite the right word, but we can evolve in our thinking and begin to explore a little bit more well, what is the purpose of the true self as opposed to that of the ego?
So interesting, Peter, because one of the things that comes in sort of spiritual traditions, is seeking the light, almost above us, around us, and not within us, or rather, as opposed to within us. One goes on pilgrimages and to holy places, and those, of course, help us to open our resonance to what is true. But it's so easy to have the sense that one is looking elsewhere, and what you are expressing is looking for the true self, which is within, which is in harmony, in unison with the one, the true with the one. Is that, would you say, something?
Yes, I think that's right. It's nicely put, yes. And it's only then that one begins to explore other religions and seeing there is a oneness, that they all have something of this understanding within them.
And where do you find it also in other religions, Peter?
It's very much there in the writings of Ibn Arabi and the marvelous writings there. And I think we see it in Rumi a little bit, and his friend that he's always with, and seeing the relationship there between them. Yes, but it's so important that that's the whole basis of spirituality is really based on that, because that's when deeper spirituality and all the understanding can begin to reach the individual, when that time has come to see the difference between that and the ego, and learn to control the ego and be in charge.
It's going beyond the glamour of religion.
Yes. Going across, well, yes, of course, it's there in the religion itself, very much so. Yes.
So Peter, you have such an inspiring journey that you share with us. Do you see the journey evolving at this time? Do you feel that do you see that there are perceptions and I'm not quite getting the right word, but do you see, do you see that religion, our mystical paths are evolving at this time?
Yes, it's we tend to sort of look at our world and say, gosh, all wars and strife and hurt and all the rest of it. There's so much of that. And we begin to think, well, what on earth is really supposed to be happening in the literal sense? What on earth is going on here? And we realize it is part of evolution, that the ego side will always want more land, want more control, and will see itself superior to others. And so that will always cause friction. And you can't sort of have everybody trying to be more superior to each other. It becomes a nonsense. And when we realize that, we begin to see that before anything can happen, there has to become a coming together of people and of nations so that they can begin to work together. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's not just one prayer and it all happens. It is part of what we are learning. And if we look back now from primitive man and how he has evolved, or she has evolved, it's the same, we begin to understand that there's been enormous change and great experience of evolution has already taken place, and that we're beginning to come together. There are certain nations that can work together for a while. Some people can come together. Black and white can cooperate together. Male and female can be one together. And all of that is happening. We can see the possibilities, but there's still a long way to go. And we're only a little way through that evolution.
From the time when you were beginning, as it were, on your path, I mean, your path is probably many lifetimes, but from the time in this lifetime when you were beginning, there's been quite a change and an expansion of multiplication of people interested, people seeking, people. Is this significant? Just that there's much more. Much more. It's spread much more through humanity. Do you think?
The more people who begin to become open or aware is the term we use.
Yes.
Aware of their true self.
Yes.
In that sense, the greater the possibility. And that will grow, but it may take many thousands of years before we get the perfect society and everybody working in harmony together, because it is the harmony that is so important.
Yes.
The harmony of the one and seeing that we are all one together.
Yes.
And it's one source. And when we look at the different religions, we realize they've all had experiences at some stage, some mystical experience. We use the word mystical as a way of trying to explain it or refer to it. And so there is a oneness there, and it's the same source all the way through. And it isn't a mass of gods for each religion. It is the same oneness. And that will take a long time for that to evolve, because people have to break down a little bit from their own religion and the ego side of it, which says, we know and you don't, and be open to other people and be open to what they believe and think and the way they work and express it in their own lives and with their children. And when we see how they express it and we see the goodness that is there, as well as the horrors of the ego and the bad side of that can develop.
Peter, is this already happening in a way outside the sphere of the established churches?
Yes. And I see the Sufi way that we explore is very much opening that way and teaching in that way, and which is why I've been so attracted to it, and I love being a part of it.
So what is it in the Sufi way that attracts you, Peter?
Because of the teaching of the oneness of everything, and the seeking for harmony. And that is the way. Eventually it all has to evolve along that sort of line.
It's coming also through the opening of the ideal of the planet, of the earth, of relationship with the earth. And it seems that this in some ways the mother got the divine mother, but doesn't have to be defined in that way. But there is a tremendous sense of tremendous respect and love and awe for the being of the earth and of the cosmos.
And that's what we're beginning to see is happening at the moment. It's being forced on us to see it that way because of the ego wanting to survive on the earth, as it were. It forces it to look to see what's going on. And it is lovely that this change is just beginning, and that we see that a part of our role is, in fact, to look after the earth and to help it in the earth's evolution rather than in its destruction. And that is a very big thought, and it's early on, and there will be many who will try and knock it down and destroy it. The ego side will really say, no, we want to live as we want to live and have everything that we want instantly. All that has to evolve and gradually become an understanding with the majority. And so we can even go a little bit further, because if we can see that part of the love of the source of all works through us and helps evolution, then we realize a little bit of what another part of our purpose is to play a part in the evolution, and actually to do, as it would say in Christian language, God's will on earth as it is in heaven. And the meaning of that becomes very important indeed. And to make that inner sacrifice, to say that some of the pleasures of earth come when we begin to work together and do the will. And we all work as one.
Because it seems that called on many of the world's religions, but it seems that all religions that I can think of, that one can think of, have a deep relationship with the earth, and so it's when the ego, you talked about the ego, how the ego disperses, the ego's self-interest disperses, then we have a much more loving and respectful relationship with our earth, and so with each other, because inevitably when we have a relationship with our earth, we have a relationship with every being on the earth.
Yes. Yes, lovely. And that's very well put and beautifully done. But it's going to take its time. And people forget in their prayer and say, we want to do this. Oh God, please allow us all to be peaceful and everything else. And we expect it to happen instantly. But the whole understanding of the relationship with the one is that you have to be patient. And it's a Sufi teaching, comes from Ibn Arabi's teaching, really. It's implied there, this understanding of being patient with the one who loves you, knows you, and from whom you came. And it will happen, and you give it energy to happen, and you're open by praying that you could be used for it to be happened in its small way through you as well. And so the prayer is important, and the understanding, because you make yourself available and you are also asking to work together to do God's will. Then it can happen, but it doesn't happen overnight. Mm-hmm. It happens in the evolutionary time.
That is so interesting. Juxtaposing, well, not juxtaposing, but reminding us that there's the individual evolution and there is the whole evolution. I'm just thinking about the zikr in the Sufi tradition, that, the first part of it is, la ilaha, dispersing all the ego's images and holds and constructs, and then illah, reminding ourselves to come into la, into the heart, the depth of the heart in which we are one with the one. And then the very end, hu, which is the light and the music, the universal light and music that comes. And that is such a beautiful image, I think, or experience that people individually open into when doing the zikr individually, or when doing it traditionally in a circle with a group of people, or and rather than or, and being one with the whole universe. So there's a calling to us, constant calling to us to be one with the one. And this is, I just wonder, how do we help this to happen, Peter? You say patience. You say, Ibn Arabi, I think, said patience. But it's also, how do we serve the one to help this to come about? Or do we just not have the desire to help it to come around? Do we just offer ourselves? Do you see what I mean?
So we're going to do both, in fact. So we offer our time and our self and our being to do the will in whatever way we're shown. Because if we're not shown in some way, the ego will jump in and distort it to our own way of wanting to do things and to our own satisfaction rather than the satisfaction of the source of all.
And the source of all is eternity.
Yes.
Eternal love.
Yes.
Eternal life. Eternal eternity. So, Peter, what would you offer us in this juncture, or in this time, in the dance of this time? Because you've mentioned earlier, that we see around us wars and tragedies, and what do you see as our surrender? How do we surrender and allow the one to be in us and through us?
The first thing is to accept that we've got an ego and to explore inwardly our own relationship with the ego. What do I mean by ego? And have a laugh at it from time to time when it wants to express itself and it wants to put on special clothing, literally and spiritually, in order to show off. And so it's this constant awareness of looking at that and beginning to fight against the power of the ego, which is so strong. That's where the Gurdjieff work I found was very appropriate. And some of the teachings there would be very helpful to a lot of people who are following this particular way. And it's very much dependent on this understanding. But it's even then, of course, seeing that everybody is struggling and trying to become aware or has switched off, and begin to see what happens when we switch off, that we lose connection with the source, that we're left with the energy of the earth and worldly things, and we become separate from them. And that can lead us in all sorts of different ways, and probably illnesses as well.
So, when you speak of the Gurdjieff,
yes,
identification, of the need to struggle with the ego, I think also of the Buddhist way, which is to breathe and to let the mind rest in the breath, and not to struggle with the ideas of the ego that come through, but just, if you like, to let them be. And as one lets them be, so they have no alternative but to dissolve, because we're not giving them any energy.
Yes.
they like having the breath, to to move us around. And when we're centered in our breath, the ego can't grab any of it. And so we actually see our ego. We see it clearly, and we can just see it for what it is and smile at it, And it feels like a very beautiful path. The one, I think with Gurdjieff, I'm not sure, the one of the awareness, taking on board and identifying it and choosing alternatives, partly rationally, the mind and the heart. And this way, which is to just deprive it of energy.
Yes. It's an amazing journey to begin to awaken to the understanding and then to begin to become part of it, or desire to become part of it, to give oneself to it more fully as we mature.
And what is also a part of so many mystic paths is to be, I'm not quite sure, to be embraced, as it were, to be held in a higher light on our journey into the one.
Yes.
And so, a great being like Buddha, or I don't know about in Gurdjieff's case, whether, he was, because he was teaching of a presence that would help us move forward. It's like that beautiful, Blake picture of the angels going up the stairs, that somehow there's the light at the top and we can move up, because the struggle, it's so easy to become disillusioned, discouraged. But somehow when there is the light and the being and the presence to help us through those challenges, it feels so. It's what a great mystic tradition gives us, as with Jesus, as with different various like Ramana Maharshi and Hazrat Khan and so on, that we do need that all-embracing presence to help us on our way towards the one.
Yes. Yes, lovely. Yes. Yes.
And so you find that, Peter, your journey has been so much courage and so much searching, clear searching. As you come, this is a rather cheeky question, as you come, to realize the one, and you give us in your meditations, your prayers, you give us such a sense of an experience. It's an experience of the one, the presence. And we need that on our way.
We do indeed, yes. And it's an awakening to that. Yes. That is the great thing about discovery of one's true self, yes, and the world around us, yes, and our role.
Yes, and my experience is that very often I need to be able to call on the presence of a great being who is helping me on my way. It may be Hazrat Khan, it may be Buddha, it may be Tara, but there is, almost the great, yes, the spirit of guidance in our invocation, yes, the spirit of guidance which helps, which is supporting us, yes, yes, and invoking, if you like, before we've reached the oneness, promising us that presence, if that makes any sense to it.
I think that, yes, that's right. And it is exactly that, of learning to be open. And the only way of doing that is to love one another or care for one another, however, whatever degree you want to put it into, and see that we are already one together. And when we accept that we're one with the source of all, we're all drinking out of the same cup, the cup of love. And that's supposed to be shown in the Christian communion, or taking the cup, but often gets overlooked or not fully understood.
Thank you, Peter. It's really beautiful. I do have another question, but we've come to a beautiful completion here, which is about the Grail.
Holy Grail. Well, yes, that's really. Yes.
Do you have a sense of that?
Yes. It's difficult to know what is meant by the Holy Grail, because people have different views about it. And it is a pearl of great price. It's probably another expression for it, that you give up anything for it. And it is to abide in the love of the source of all fully. And that may not happen in our generations that we can see, but it may be in hundreds or thousands of years' time, in our time scale, that we will begin to really realize that the beauty of creation is that the Creator is always creating.
That perspective.
And we expand with it. And so that lovely understanding is, why would somebody want to create and bother with it all? And I need to be in everyone, so I am everybody. Everything that is me is now dispersed amongst all the people. I did in one state ask to be shown what is the purpose of life. And it was shown to me to be rather like the womb of a woman, that all the eggs are scattered out around and become part of creation, and everyone has to return at some stage to its source, fully realized of its own accord, because it's been given to think and be itself, and to surrender it all in the end as being part, and come back to the source from whence it came, having experienced it. So thousands of starlets all being thrown out and becoming the world and becoming the people and making their own journey in whatever way, until they suddenly realize the spirituality and begin to come together again. And they come together in a quite realistic way, because we talk of angels. If we begin to do the work of an angel, which is to look after and care for others to begin with, at the first stages, we then have to say, oh, could I surrender with all the other angels and just be an angel? And we'd have one identity as an angel. Would I be prepared to give up my own identity, which is the hardest thing of all, and just be part of an angel? But that comes eventually, and we realize what angels are. They're rather like groups of people who've surrendered themselves, so they have one identity, which reflects the oneness of the source of all. But even then, they've still got something of an identity, because they are an angel. And so they have to surrender that eventually. And so with other angels, merge together and lose our identity, individual identity, so that they can say, yes, we are one. And so they become archangels. And then the group of archangels have to come together and surrender the idea of being separate as archangels and be one with the source of all, the evolution right through.